From A Nightmare About Twiggy to a TV Guide Worst Show ranking, this cross-dressing sitcom hid bizarre production secrets, unaired episodes shown only in Australia, and a career-destroying curse that haunted its star. What really happened behind the scenes of television's most controversial 1968 failure? Fact 1. Inspired by a bad dream about Twiggy. The entire concept for The Ugliest Girl in Town started with a bad dream and a magazine. One night in 1967, screenwriter Robert Kaufman had a nightmare that woke him up in the middle of the night. He couldn't fall back asleep, so he did what many people do when they can't sleep. He picked up a magazine to read. Inside that magazine was an article about Twiggy, the famous British model who was taking the fashion world by storm at the time. Twiggy was known for her extremely thin frame, short pixie haircut, and androgynous appearance that defined the mod look of the late 1960s. As Kaufman stared at the photos of Twiggy, something struck him as unusual. He thought she looked like a boy dressed up as a girl. That's when the light bulb went off in his head. What if there was a television sitcom where a boy was actually mistaken for a girl model? And what if that show was set in Maud London, the epicenter of the swinging 60s fashion scene? Kaufman took this idea to Harry Ackerman at Screen Gems, the studio behind hit shows like Bewitched and The Flying Nun. Ackerman loved the concept because he had always been interested in creating a comedy series set in Maud London. The idea seemed fresh, timely, and tied directly to the biggest fashion trend of the era. What started as insomnia and a random magazine flip became the foundation for one of the most controversial and short-lived sitcoms in television history. Fact 2. Created by the same team behind Bewitched. When The Ugliest Girl in Town was being developed, it had all the signs of becoming a major hit because it came from one of the most successful producers in television history. Harry Ackerman was the executive producer behind the show, and by 1968, he was already a legend in the industry. Ackerman had created or produced some of the biggest sitcoms on television, including Bewitched, which was a massive success about a witch married to a regular guy, and The Flying Nun, starring Sally Field as a nun who could literally fly. Both of these shows were huge hits for ABC and ran for multiple seasons. Ackerman was known in Hollywood as the Dean of Television Comedy, and at the time The Ugliest Girl in Town premiered, he had two other successful shows currently on the air. Bewitched and The Flying Nun were both still running strong. With that kind of track record, everyone at ABC and Screen Gems expected The Ugliest Girl in Town to be another winner. Ackerman himself was confident about the project and genuinely believed that a comedy about a man dressing as a woman to be with his girlfriend in London would appeal to young audiences and capture the spirit of the times. But despite having the golden touch with magical sitcoms and quirky premises, this time Ackerman's instincts were completely wrong. The show became one of his rare failures and was canceled after just 4 months on the air. Fact 3. Replaced the iconic Batman series, The Ugliest Girl in Town had the unfortunate task of filling one of the most beloved time slots on television, which added enormous pressure to an already risky concept. In March of 1968, ABC made the controversial decision to cancel Batman, the campy superhero series starring Adam West that had been a surprise hit when it first premiered in the mid-1960s. Batman had captured audiences with its colorful villains, over-the-top action sequences, and tongue-in-cheek humor, making it a cultural phenomenon. When ABC pulled the plug on the show due to declining ratings in its final season, fans were upset and disappointed. The network decided to give Batman's Thursday night time slot to The Ugliest Girl in Town, hoping that audiences would embrace the new sitcom. This decision put the cross-dressing comedy in an impossible position right from the start. Viewers who had been tuning in to watch the Caped Crusader fight crime in Gotham City were now being asked to watch a man dress up as a female model in London instead. The contrast between the two shows couldn't have been more dramatic, and many Batman fans simply refused to give the new show a chance. From the very first episode, The Ugliest Girl in Town was fighting an uphill battle against audience expectations and the lingering disappointment over Batman's cancellation, making it even harder for the show to find its footing with viewers. Fact 4. 3 episodes never aired in America. Most people don't realize that The Ugliest Girl in Town actually produced more episodes than American audiences ever got to see. ABC commissioned a total of 20 episodes for the show's first and only season, but when the network decided to cancel the series in January of 1969, they had only broadcast 17 of those episodes to American viewers. The final 3 episodes that had already been filmed and completed were left sitting on the shelf, never to air on American television. This wasn't uncommon for canceled shows in that era. Networks would often pull the plug before burning through their entire order of episodes if the ratings were particularly bad. However, these 3 unaired episodes didn't just disappear into the vault forever. Instead, they were eventually shown on network television in Australia, where the series had been picked up for broadcast. The episodes also aired in the United Kingdom, giving international audiences a more complete view of the series than Americans ever received. For decades, these 3 episodes remained a curiosity for American TV historians and fans of obscure television, representing a small piece of the show that domestic audiences never experienced. It's a strange footnote in the show's history that people in other countries actually got to see how the series was supposed to continue beyond its abrupt cancellation in the United States. Fact 5. Ranked number 18 on TV Guide's Worst Shows list. Decades after The Ugliest Girl in Town left the airwaves, the show received an official stamp of dishonor that ensured it would never be forgotten. In 2002, TV Guide magazine published a special feature listing the 50 worst TV shows of all time, ranking programs from across television history based on their poor quality, bad concepts, and overall failure to connect with audiences. The Ugliest Girl in Town earned the dubious distinction of being ranked number 18 on that infamous list, placing it among some of the most legendary failures in the history of American television. This ranking came more than 30 years after the show's cancellation, proving that its reputation as a misguided disaster had not faded with time. Being included on this list essentially cemented the show's legacy as one of the medium's most notorious flops, guaranteeing that future generations would continue to hear about it as an example of what not to do when creating a television series. The TV Guide ranking also introduced the show to younger audiences who had never heard of it before, since most episodes had long since disappeared from circulation and were rarely, if ever, rerun on television. What started as a 4-month failure in 1968 had become a permanent fixture in television history as a cautionary tale about ambitious concepts gone wrong. Fact 6. Destroyed Peter Kastner's promising career. The failure of The Ugliest Girl in Town didn't just hurt the show itself. It had a devastating impact on the career of its lead actor, Peter Kastner. Before taking on the role of Timothy Blair, Kastner had been a rising star with an incredibly promising future ahead of him. The Canadian actor had earned a BAFTA nomination for his role in Francis Ford Coppola's 1966 comedy You're a Big Boy Now, and he had also starred in the acclaimed film Nobody Waved Goodbye, which became a surprise hit and was later ranked as one of the best Canadian films of all time. Hollywood seemed ready to embrace Kastner as a talented young leading man, but The Ugliest Girl in Town changed everything. The Toronto Star specifically reported that the series had a disastrous effect on his career, and it's easy to see why. Being the face of one of television's most ridiculed flops made it nearly impossible for Kastner to land quality leading roles afterward. Following the show's cancellation, he found himself unable to secure the kind of work he had been getting before, and he was forced to accept smaller supporting roles in films and television just to keep working. His career never recovered from the damage, and he struggled, both professionally and personally, for decades. By the time Peter Kastner passed away from heart failure in 2008 at the age of 64, he had reportedly run into severe financial problems, a tragic end for someone whose career had once held so much promise. Fact 7. One episode featured a sex test storyline. Even by the standards of 1960s television, one particular episode of The Ugliest Girl in Town pushed boundaries in a way that seems shocking even today. The episode involved a storyline where Timmy, the male character pretending to be a female model, ends up at a publicity shoot for an East versus West track meet. During the event, Timmy gets caught up in the moment and starts bragging about how she was supposedly a great long jumper back in high school. The situation takes an unexpected turn when one of the members of the West team suddenly faints and can't compete, leaving the team desperate for a replacement. Based on Timmy's boasting about her athletic abilities, the team recruits her to fill in for the competition. Things get even more complicated when Timmy actually performs an impressive jump during the event, drawing attention and suspicion from the other competitors. The opposition team becomes suspicious that something isn't quite right and demands that Timmy undergo a sex test to verify that she is actually a woman. This kind of storyline would be considered highly controversial today, but even in the late 1960s, it was pushing the envelope in terms of what was acceptable for a primetime sitcom. The episode shows just how far the writers were willing to go to mine comedy from the show's central premise of gender deception. Fact 8. Co-starred future director Gary Marshall's brother. The Ugliest Girl in Town had an interesting connection to Hollywood royalty that most viewers probably didn't realize at the time. The show featured an actor named Gary Marshall, spelled M-A-R-S-H-A-L, who played Gene Blair, the photographer brother of the main character Timothy. This has led to decades of confusion because many people assume this was the same Gary Marshall who would go on to become one of Hollywood's most successful directors and producers. However, Gary Marshall, with one R in his first name and no second L in his last name, was actually a completely different person. The famous Gary Marshall, spelled with 2 R's and 2 L's, was the television legend who created Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley in the 1970s, and who later directed massive hit films like Pretty Woman, The Princess Diaries, and Runaway Bride. That Gary Marshall was already working as a successful television writer and producer in 1968 when The Ugliest Girl in Town aired, but he had nothing to do with this particular show. The Gary Marshall who appeared in The Ugliest Girl in Town was simply an actor with a very similar name who happened to land a regular role on the series. This spelling difference has caused mix-ups over the years, with some people mistakenly believing that the future Hollywood director had an early acting role on one of television's most notorious flops. Fact 9. Scottish pop star Lulu made a guest appearance. Despite the show's struggles, The Ugliest Girl in Town managed to attract at least one major celebrity guest star during its brief run. In December of 1968, Scottish singing sensation Lulu appeared in an episode titled Popped Star, playing herself during what was arguably the peak of her international fame. Just a year earlier, Lulu had starred in the film To Sir with Love alongside Sidney Poitier and performed the movie's theme song, which became a massive hit. The song reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart in the United States and stayed there for 5 consecutive weeks, making it the biggest-selling single of 1967 in America. By the time she appeared on The Ugliest Girl in Town, Lulu was riding high on that success and had also been given her own BBC television variety show called Happening for Lulu. Her appearance on the sitcom represented an attempt by the producers to add some star power and credibility to a show that was already struggling in the ratings. Having a chart-topping pop star appear as a guest was seen as a way to attract viewers and generate some buzz, especially since the show was set in London and was trying to capture the spirit of the British music and fashion scene. However, even Lulu's star power couldn't save the series from cancellation just 2 months later. Fact 10. Featured songs by future Oscar winner Carol Bayer Sager. One of the most surprising elements of The Ugliest Girl in Town was the quality of the music featured throughout the series, which came from a songwriter who would go on to become one of the most successful and celebrated composers in the entertainment industry. Almost every episode of the show contained original songs written by Carol Bayer Sager, who at the time was still early in her career but already showing signs of the talent that would make her a legend. In 1968, Sager was working as a staff songwriter and was given the job of creating music for the sitcom, providing new songs that fit with various plot points and situations throughout the episodes. While the show itself quickly disappeared and was largely forgotten, Carol Bayer Sager's career took off in spectacular fashion in the decades that followed. She went on to write massive hit songs for some of the biggest names in music, including Barbra Streisand, Celine Dion, Michael Jackson, and many others. Her songwriting skills eventually earned her an Academy Award for Best Original Song, along with Grammy Awards, Golden Globes, and numerous other honors. Looking back, it's remarkable that such a poorly received television series featured the early work of someone who would become an Oscar-winning composer, making those original songs from The Ugliest. Girl in Town, an unexpected piece of music history from a true songwriting legend. Fact 11. The theme song became more famous than the show. The most enduring legacy of The Ugliest Girl in Town turned out to be its theme song, which became far more memorable than the actual series itself. The catchy opening tune was written by Howard Greenfield and Helen Miller, who were both legendary songwriters from the famous Brill Building in New York City, where many of the biggest pop hits of the 1950s and 60s were created. Greenfield and Miller had written numerous chart-topping songs for major artists throughout their careers, and they brought that professional touch to the sitcom's theme. The song was performed by a relatively unknown folk rock trio called the Willow Bees, who recorded it for SGC Records, which was owned by Screen Gems, the same company that produced the show. The Willow Bees never achieved major success as a group, but their recording of the Ugliest Girl in Town theme became their most recognized work. What's fascinating is that decades after the show was canceled and forgotten, many people who watched it as children could still remember the melody and some of the words to the theme song, even though they couldn't recall anything else about the actual episodes. Multiple viewers have said over the years that the theme song stayed stuck in their heads for 30 or 40 years, proving that it was far more effective and memorable than the show it was written for. Fact 12. Filmed on location in swinging London. The Ugliest Girl in Town wasn't just set in London, it was actually filmed there, which was a significant and expensive commitment for an American television sitcom in the late 1960s. The producers made the decision to shoot on location in England because they wanted to capture the authentic atmosphere of what was known as swinging London, the mod fashion and music scene that had made the city the cultural capital of the world earlier in the decade. The show featured real London streets, buildings, and locations as backdrops for the episodes, giving it a visual authenticity that couldn't be replicated on a Hollywood soundstage. However, there was an ironic timing problem with this decision. By the time the show began filming in 1968, the swinging 60s era was already coming to an end, and the vibrant mod culture that had defined London just a few years earlier was fading away. The bright colors, miniskirts, and optimistic energy of the mid-60s were being replaced by a different, more cynical mood as the decade drew to a close. So while the show was trying to capture and celebrate the height of London's fashion scene, it was actually documenting the tail end of that movement. This means the series unintentionally became a time capsule of a cultural moment that was already disappearing, preserving what one reviewer later called the last vestiges of swinging London on film. Fact 13. Critics called it humorous as terminal cancer. The reviews for The Ugliest Girl in Town were absolutely brutal, with television critics across the country tearing the show apart in ways that are shocking to read even decades later. James Dussard, writing for the Louisville Courier-Journal, delivered perhaps the most vicious review of all when he wrote that the series was as humorous as terminal cancer, a comparison so harsh that it still stands out as one of the most savage critiques in television history. The New York Times wasn't much kinder, with their critic Richard Shepard calling it the most vapid half-hour in the nation, while the Philadelphia Inquirer said the show had some basically distasteful overtones. But Newsweek magazine may have delivered the strangest and most biting assessment of all, with their critic Harry Waters suggesting that this was the first television series aimed directly at the 12-year-old transvestite, implying that the show's audience was so narrow and bizarre that it essentially didn't exist. Not every critic was completely negative. Time magazine noted that the show here and there amusingly needles the fashion pace-setters, and the Dallas Morning News said it was funny in spite of a premise which is still raising eyebrows, but these mild compliments were completely drowned out by the overwhelming tide of harsh criticism. The reviews made it clear that critics saw the show as not just bad television, but as something genuinely offensive and uncomfortable to watch. Fact 14. Patricia Brake later became a British sitcom icon. While The Ugliest Girl in Town was a disaster for Peter Kastner's career, his co-star Patricia Brake managed to escape relatively unscathed and went on to achieve significant success in British television. Brake played Julie Renfield, the British actress who served as the love interest and the reason Timothy dressed up as a woman to follow her to London. After the show was cancelled, Brake returned to the United Kingdom and continued working steadily as an actress, eventually landing a role that would make her a beloved figure in British comedy. In the 1970s, she was cast as Ingrid Fletcher in the BBC sitcom Porridge, a prison comedy starring Ronnie Barker that became one of the most popular and critically acclaimed British sitcoms of all time. Brake played the sexy, blonde daughter of the main character who would visit her father in prison, and the role made her a household name in Britain. She also appeared in the sequel series Going Straight and had a long career in British television that included roles in soap operas like EastEnders and Coronation Street. What's interesting is that when Patricia Brake passed away in 2022 at the age of 79, most of the obituaries and career retrospectives focused on her work in British television and conveniently left out any mention of The Ugliest Girl in Town, suggesting that even she preferred not to be reminded of her brief involvement with one of American television's most notorious failures. Fact 15. Lasted only 4 months, but became a cultural punchline. The Ugliest Girl in Town had an incredibly short life on television, running for just 4 months from September 26, 1968 to January 30, 1969, which adds up to only 126 days on the air. In that brief span, the show managed to air only 17 episodes before ABC pulled the plug and removed it from the schedule. Most television failures simply disappear and are forgotten, remembered only by the people who worked on them and a handful of TV historians who study the medium. But The Ugliest Girl in Town achieved something unusual. It became immortal in its infamy. Rather than fading away into obscurity, the show became a cultural reference point that writers, critics, and television professionals would invoke for decades whenever they wanted to discuss failed concepts or misguided programming decisions. The show's title alone became shorthand for television failure, and its premise was regularly cited as an example of how not to develop a series. This lasting notoriety means that The Ugliest Girl in Town is actually better remembered than many shows that ran for multiple seasons and had far more episodes, simply because it became such a famous example of everything going wrong. The show proved that sometimes being spectacularly bad can make you more memorable than being mediocre, ensuring that this 4-month disaster would be talked about and referenced long after more successful shows from the same era had been completely forgotten.